Yo, what's good people? Today we have another review. Today we're going to be reviewing the black golden Fanta. Now off the bat, I prefer this black golden Fanta just because it feels more clean. It just feels more responsive, and I'll explain why. Now, if we look at the capsule top, this is not a capsule top. This is a bean top. This bean top is incredible. Like, it's my favorite now. It's not like I can't go back to using capsule tops because that's cap. I can, but it's just, the size and the feel is just really, I don't know how to describe it. You just have to kind of try it for yourself. But the bean top is really sick. I feel like it's really underrated. So yeah, we're going to be reviewing the black Fanta. As you can see, the machined lines, everything, the attention to detail is insane. This is the thing with arcade stick, and I always say this, but it's like there's so many parts you can interchange and try out for different setups. I used to use like A5s or KO switches, or even sometimes I have like 3 sets of AM5s, but I just think the On-Run A6s just take the cake. Like, they're so solid and consistent and smooth, but they're not super stiff. Like, they are on the stiffer end for sure, but I don't feel like they're too stiff. Something like the Mugen switches are really stiff, so that's, you know, you're getting right to the other end of the spectrum in terms of stiffness of switches. But I feel like the On-Run A6s are really sick for this build in particular. We're going to run through parts I use, tech specs, and all that good stuff. Sound testing as well, obviously, and playing with it in game. Do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe. Liking will help with the algorithm, commenting will also help with the algorithm, and subscribing will let me know that you enjoy the content. Let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about tech specs. We're going to do things a little bit differently because it's not actually a lever you can buy. You kind of have to spec it out yourself. So because this is custom, I'm going to start with the top. So the top, I have a bean top. So if we go to golden lever, we go down, GL top handle. I actually run a bean top. I have the white bean top with the gold rim. For me personally, I like the bean top because before using the bean top, I liked capsule top. So, you know, the Neo 11 Neo, we had the Sandrix VE7. Both of those had capsule tops. Now, I really do enjoy capsule tops, but I wanted to try the bean top, but actually it's my favorite top now. So I rank the bean top over the capsule top. Even though I do like capsule tops, I really do enjoy the bean top. So that's the top that I have. I run the white bean top with the gold rim. Okay, looking at the next thing is the shaft and the washer. So I actually run a golden aluminium shaft, 9mm. So I run 9mm golden aluminium shaft. And of course, when you buy a shaft from ASI, the respective washer comes with it. So you don't really need to worry about what washer do I need to get. So yeah, I use the 9mm aluminium golden shaft. Okay, so construction wise, I use black Fanta parts. The difference between the black Fanta and the white Fanta is the switch basing is the same, but the black Fanta compresses tension more. And if you look closely, you can see in the black Fanta build, it kind of has these nibs that grip onto the tension a little bit more, whereas the white Fanta doesn't actually have that. So the black Fanta compresses tension just a little bit more. So that's why I prefer the black Fanta. It just feels a bit more snappy than the white Fanta, personally for me. I have 2 black Fanta builds and I have 1 white Fanta build, so I can kind of compare them side by side, and that's why I personally think the black Fanta is better for me. I just prefer the higher tension. So let's look at the collar next. The collar, I run either the full circle, the black full circle, or I run the square core. So it's like a low collar or like a mid collar. The black collars also compress tension. So it doesn't matter if you get the low circle, the low square, the low square core. If it's black, it's gonna compress the tension. So that's why I prefer the black parts as well, the black collars. So I either run a black square core or a black full circle. Right now, I think I'm running a black square core. I have yet to try the octagonal guides because I don't know, I'm just not a fan. Even when I played on Japanese levers, I always gravitated towards square and not octagonal just because they feel a bit weird to me, but you know, you might really enjoy it. So that obviously, again, that's the beauty of arcade sticks, and in particular ASI ecosystem is very good. It has a lot of choice. Core, I use again a black part, oversized core. So the oversized core is going to be black. You're going to see it in B-roll as well. So the standard core is 13mm. Now I used a 0.5 oversized core at 13.5. You can go even more oversized at 14 and 14.5, but for me personally, the tension I'm using, the core and the parts really balance to make a very not super heavy but snappy lever. I've got to mention, I don't actually use a spring in these levers. I take the spring out because I like spin, not too much spin, not free spin, but I'd like a little bit of spin to aid with the kind of the smoothness of the lever. I think that having spin aids a little bit with the smoothness of levers. So I actually take the spring out. What the spring does is it controls shaft spin. So if you don't like spin, there's different strengths of springs you can get. So you can get heavy spring to just completely eliminate spin, or you can take the spring out to get a little bit more spin back, if that makes sense. Because also in the core, there's a kind of rubber ring, which also kind of helps with eliminating spin. That's why I said my levers do not free spin. They still have a little bit of resistance, but they do spin a little bit, and that's what I prefer. Okay, grommet now is interesting because I use a yellow grommet from the white golden Fanta. You can't actually buy this separately. That's the only thing that is a little bit tricky if you want to kind of build my setup, is that you can't purchase it separately. So what we're gonna have to do is I parted out the golden Fanta stick and I use the yellow tension. So you're gonna see the yellow tensions here. Now the tension is actually 40A plus. So the plus means it has more tension on the cardinal directions. So that means that diagonals are going to be easier to access, because if you have more tension on the cardinals, the diagonals are going to be easier to kind of access because there's less resistance in that direction. So that's going to promote easier diagonals. I really do like these kind of X and plus tension technologies that ASI are using. They just feel super consistent. You know, characters like Hwoarang with JFSR, stuff like that, super consistent on both sides. And previously, before, I did have trouble doing JFSR and stuff like that on P2 consistently, whereas I'm using these levers and this grommet technology, and it's really cleaned up my down forward input. So yeah, I think this is really helping with certain execution techniques. So now we ran through most of the lever construction. Now we have the switches I use and also the actuators I use. So the switches I use are simply just Omron A6s. I use the hard. They don't feel too stiff to me, but they're labeled as hard because these are obviously softer. The A5s are soft, and the A6s are a little bit tougher. I would compare them to maybe like a BD switch or a Gersung A3, but for me, the Omrons are better than BDs. I have a set of BDs and I have 3 other sets of AM5s. Personally, for me, I feel like the hype around AM5s is because firstly, they're discontinued, and it's the kind of fear of missing out aspect that people kind of overhype the AM5s. For me personally, I think the Omron A6s are just way better, way more consistent, way better quality control. Panasonic does have good QC, but for me, Omron is just always consistent. So yeah, that's why I prefer the Omron A6s. So that's the switch of choice for me. Now let's talk about the actuator and what I use. So ball bearing. I use the black bearing because it's plastic and it doesn't require any maintenance. I use a 60mm ball bearing. Ball bearing is crazy. If you haven't ever used a ball bearing actuator, what it is kind of like, it's an actuator, but it has ball bearings inside. So the actuator actually has its own spin, which allows the lever to move more freely when you're kind of actuating the switches. It's a really unique feature to this lever. I've never seen it before, and it's very smooth, and I use it in any lever possible that it's compatible with, honestly, because it's just so clean. So I use a 60mm black ball bearing, and then you also need to pair it with a bushing as well. So we're going to talk about the bushing. Bushing, I use either a 13.5 or a 14.5. You have to choose this size with your shaft size, so it kind of corresponds. But for me, my shaft size is in a spot where it's compatible with 13.5 and 14.5. So for me, it doesn't really make a difference. So this is what bushing I use, 13.5 or 14.5. Okay, let's talk about the Black Fanta. The Black Fanta is my personal build. You can't actually buy this lever pre-assembled, so you will need to get the parts. But again, to reiterate, ASI's ecosystem is very easy to jump into, and there's so many different parts, and you will be able to find a setup for you. We went through the setup of my lever. We're going to do some execution tests to see how the lever performs, movement, wave dashing, sidestepping, how easy it is to sidestep, just general things that I always do for lever reviews. But obviously this time it's different because this is my personal setup and how I configured it for me. Okay, the tension for me is perfect because it has a 40+ tension inside, but the black parts, of course, compress the tension. So it kind of adds the tension back in, and it's very snappy when returning to neutral. Super, like, bro, super consistent. So for me, the tension's perfect because I typically don't like super heavy tensions and super heavy grommets. Now, I can use them, like the Super Harangue. I have a Super Harangue Fanta, and that is very, very stiff. The Fujin V3 as well, I have one, and I have a Fujin V2. Those are also very stiff. So I can use them. It's just, I feel like it all depends on the person really, but for me, I prefer a soft medium tension. So in here is actually a very, very light tension at 40 plus A, but the black parts inside compress the tension to make it more like a 45 to 50. I would say maybe on the 47A-ish range. So I would say it's slightly more stiff than the ASI turquoise, which previously was my favorite, but it's not as hard as the blue one, which is 58. It's kind of in between, similar to how the Neely Neo has a yellow/orange tension. That's in between a purple crown tension and a blue crown tension, so it's kind of in between. So this is a similar situation in terms of the ASI tensions. It's in between turquoise 45A and blue 50A. It's perfect for me. Now input, it's responsive, but it's not like super sensitive. So like when you move the lever, it's not going to actuate straight away. You actually need to kind of be deliberate with your inputs. Now it's not like huge throw where I have to like really push the lever to actuate a switch. It doesn't have much dead zone, but it's not super sensitive like a 1:1 ratio would be. This has a 16.5mm spacing and a 16mm ball bearing. So there is a little bit of tolerance there, but it's still quite responsive and sensitive. It's not ultra sensitive though, because I hate ultra sensitivity because that makes the lever feel mushy, in my opinion. When the actuator is too big for the switch spacing, the switches start to become mushy, and that's a feeling I don't like within my levers, because then it just feels unresponsive and I can't control the movements. So for me, this switch spacing and ball bearing is perfect. Very consistent for me. I feel like it's not super difficult to actuate up, but it's stiff enough to where I don't get misinputs, because a lot of levers, they have rebound and pushback. And so for me, this lever doesn't have that. It has enough tension and enough neutral solidness, if that makes sense, to not get that spring back. And it's easy for me to sidestep up, which was a problem for me with a lot of levers, is that I found it very difficult to sidestep up and actuate up forward and up back input. So for me, it's perfect. Electric consistency for me, pretty good, very consistent. Consistent wave dash, very consistent wave dash. And with this lever, I feel like I can control my speed a lot better. So if I want to do very quick, I can. But if I want to space my wave dashes out, I can control it very easily. So that's something that I do really like, and I kind of built it for, well, versatility really, but it just so happens to work with Mishimas very nicely and smoothly. Now, again, the ball bearing I'm using, I think, contributes to the smoothness of the lever itself, because of course it's on ball bearings, right? So it's going to be smoother just by design and by nature. But I just think in reality and in practice, it's super smooth. Like the inputs are kind of crazy. So let's test some execution, real heavy execution stuff. So pretty consistent, perfect electrics. Let's try on P1. So consistent, perfect electrics on P1. Now I have a very weird method of doing electrics on P1 or perfect electrics on P1. So I'm going to show you the input on the big screen. I flick with my thumb and then I slam into down forward like that. So let's try it again. See what I mean? It's very consistent. So practice this method. If you have problems with electrics or perfect electrics on P1, try this method. It's very strange at first, but once you get used to the input, it's actually very easy. So you flick with your thumb, just actuate very slightly, let it return to neutral and slam into down forward. So that's the way I do perfect electrics on P1, and of course normal perfect electric on P2. So as you can see, difficult to do execution becomes easier if the inputs are consistent. I'm not saying using a lever that's consistent makes execution easier, but it just makes it easier to do consistently because the inputs are more consistent, if that makes sense. So you can trust your ability when using a lever like this. And of course, I built this lever to my needs and to my standards. So it works for me. The tension is perfect. The diagonals are really, really clean and consistent. Wave dashing feels very, very nice to control. Very, very consistent diagonals. Super consistent. Super consistent even on P2. Typically is more difficult to do these type of inputs on P2, but as you can see, very consistent. You can also do Hwoarang's JFSR with the perfect electric no neutral method. So you can do forward, down, down, forward, +4 like that, which is interesting. But anyway, yeah, super consistent inputs on both sides. Okay, so what's the final verdict? The final verdict for me is the tension is perfect for my taste. Now, I like, as mentioned before, I like soft to medium tension. So references would be, you know, ASI 45A turquoise, IST 32A violet. Now, they don't actually do that. That's discontinued, which is very sad because I really did like that tension. That was perfect for me. So now I've kind of gotten used to the knee tension, even though it's a little bit stiffer than I like. I've gotten used to it now, so I can use the knee tension with no issues. The V1, I'm talking about, you know, the clear one. So the Fanta clear knee tension I can use, and I've gotten used to it, and it's nice for me now. But I prefer the IST violet tension, so that's the perfect one for me. ASI, I like the turquoise 45A or the orange plus grommet, which you'll be seeing soon. I can't really talk about it too much, but you'll be seeing that soon. So yeah, I like soft medium tension. I use Omron A6s. I would say the stiffness is comparable to Gersong A3s, but it's much more consistent, and the QC is very good for Omron switches. I don't think the QC is very good for Gersong. It's very hit and miss. I forgot to mention the bean top is great as well. So for me, I have small hands, so the bean top is a capture top, and it's essentially a capture top but squished. So for me and my taste, I love capture tops, by the way. Don't think that I don't like capture tops. It's one of my favorite tops, but I think bean top is really, for me, the sweet spot in terms of size and control, if that makes sense. So yeah, I really like the bean top from ASI. Excellent. So overall, I think this lever is super consistent, super versatile. The diagonals are fantastic, as you saw there. Electric consistency is fantastic. P1, P2 execution, unlock. And of course, I'm not a Mishima player, but I can still do the majority of things with Mishimas. I still have it in the locker. So for me, this lever is great. But that was it for this review. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.